Seneca was a Roman Stoic philosopher, born around 4 BC in what's now Spain. But don't let the word philosopher fool you. He wasn't some quiet academic sitting in a library. The guy was right in the thick of it. Politics, power, wealth, chaos. He became one of the most influential men in Rome, serving as advisor to Emperor Nero. Yeah, that Nero. One of the most volatile, dangerous rulers in history. And Seneca's life wasn't smooth either. He got exiled to the island of Corsica for 8 years. He lost people close to him. He dealt with serious illness throughout his life. And in the end, Nero ordered him to take his own life. And he did, calmly. So this wasn't a man writing philosophy from some comfortable armchair. He wrote from the mess, from real pain, real stakes, real loss. And that's exactly why his words carry so much weight. His letters and essays, they read less like philosophy and more like honest advice from a friend who's been through it. He talks about time, about anger, about grief. About how we waste our lives running after things that don't actually matter. And here's what's kind of wild. Almost everything he wrote 2,000 years ago still applies today, uncomfortably well. Now, he wasn't perfect, and that's worth saying. People have called him a hypocrite, a man who preached simplicity while living in luxury, a man who wrote about virtue while serving a tyrant. And honestly, that tension is part of what makes him so relatable. He wasn't speaking from some moral high ground. He was in the struggle, same as us. He just had the guts and the skill to write about it honestly. So this isn't about putting Seneca on a pedestal. It's about pulling out the lessons from his work that actually matter, the ones that make you stop and rethink how you're spending your days. Here's something that trips people up about Seneca. The guy was rich, like seriously rich, one of the wealthiest men in Rome. And yet, he spent a huge chunk of his writing talking about how money doesn't matter. So, was he a hypocrite? That's the easy accusation, and honestly, people threw it at him even back then. But here's the thing. If you actually read what Seneca says about wealth, it's way more nuanced than money bad. He's not telling you to give everything away and go live in a cave, not even close. What Seneca argues is something most people still can't wrap their heads around. He says, and this is almost word for word, that the wise man does not consider himself unworthy of any gifts from fortune's hands. He does not love wealth, but he would rather have it. He does not admit it into his heart, but into his home. And whatever wealth is his, he does not reject it, but keeps it, wishing it to supply greater scope for him to practice his virtue. Because there's a very specific distinction being made here. He's not anti-wealth, he's anti-attachment. There's a massive difference. Seneca is saying, go ahead, have money, build something, earn well. But the moment that money moves from your home into your heart, that's when you're in trouble. The moment your identity gets tangled up with your bank account, you've lost the game. And he puts it even more bluntly elsewhere. He says, wealth is the slave of a wise man, the master of a fool. That line hits different when you sit with it, because most people think they own their money. But Seneca warns that for the majority, it's the other way around. Money owns them. It dictates their moods, it controls their decisions, it shapes who they spend time with, what they tolerate, what they're afraid of. That's not ownership. That's slavery with a nice wardrobe. So what does it actually look like to make wealth your slave? Seneca gives us the framework. It means you use money. You don't serve it. You spend it on things that matter. You're generous with it. And this is the big one. You could walk away from it tomorrow and still be okay. Still be you. That's the test. Not whether you have wealth, but whether you could lose it and still stand. He points out that most people never run that test. They accumulate and accumulate, and they build this whole life that depends on the money staying. Their peace depends on it, their relationships depend on it, their sense of self depends on it. And so they live in constant quiet fear of losing it, which means they were never really free to begin with. And that's what Seneca keeps coming back to: freedom. He argues that true wealth isn't about the number, it's about your relationship to the number. Two people can have the exact same amount of money, and one of them is free, and the other is a prisoner. The difference isn't in their accounts, it's in their minds. But, and this matters, Seneca is not romanticizing poverty either. He's not saying struggle is noble or that wanting nice things makes you shallow. He warns against that kind of thinking too. Because rejecting money out of fear or pride is just another form of being controlled by it. You're still letting it dictate your behavior, just in the opposite direction. The sweet spot, according to Seneca, is indifference, not apathy, indifference. You enjoy wealth when it's there, you don't crumble when it's not. You hold it loosely. You let it serve your life, not become your life. And honestly, that might be one of the hardest things any human being can do. Having something valuable and not gripping it. Being surrounded by comfort and not needing it. Seneca knew that. He wasn't preaching from some moral high ground. He was wrestling with the same tension we all do. He just had the clarity to name it. Seneca has this line that hits hard. He says, "As is a tale, so is life. Not how long it is, but how good it is what matters." Read that again, slowly. He's comparing your entire life, everything you've done, everything you will do, to a story. And what does he say matters? Not the page count, not the number of chapters. The quality, the substance, how good the story actually is. And that reframes everything, doesn't it? Because most of us are obsessed with length. We want more years, more time, more birthdays. We treat life like it's a race to see who can stick around the longest. But Seneca pushes back on that, hard. He argues that a short life, lived with meaning, with depth, with rich experiences, that's worth more than decades of just being here, just existing, just going through the motions for 70, 80, 90 years. Think about it. Some of the most impactful people in history didn't live long lives, but the lives they lived, dense, full, overflowing with purpose. And then there are people who live to 100 and can barely tell you what they did with all that time. Seneca saw this. He saw it thousands of years ago, and he called it out. He takes this idea even further with another metaphor. He says, "As it is with a play, so it is with life. What matters is not how long the acting lasts, but how good it is." A play, that's what he compares life to. And he's right. Nobody walks out of the theater and says, "That was amazing. It was 4 hours long." No, they talk about the performance, the story, the moments that made them feel something. A 2-hour play that leaves you breathless is better than a 5-hour one that puts you to sleep, every single time. So Seneca's asking, what kind of performance are you putting on? Are you showing up on that stage and giving everything you've got? Or are you just trying to stay on stage as long as possible, even if you've got nothing left to say? That distinction matters, because most people confuse duration with quality. They think if they just keep going, keep showing up, keep breathing, that's enough. Seneca says it's not even close. And then he drops this one. This is the line that really stings. "You must not think a man has lived long because he has white hair and wrinkles. He has not lived long, just existed long. Just existed long. That's brutal, but it's honest. Seneca is directly attacking this assumption we all carry, that old age equals a life well lived, that wrinkles are proof of wisdom, that white hair means you've earned something. He says no. Those are signs of aging. That's biology. That's time passing. But time passing and actually living, those are two completely different things. You can age without growing. You can survive without thriving. You can clock in year after year and never once do something that makes you feel alive. And Seneca warns, that's not living, that's just existing. There's a massive difference. So what does he want us to do about it? He wants us to stop chasing length and start chasing depth. Stop counting the years and start making the years count. Not in some cheesy bumper sticker way, but genuinely. Fill your life with experiences that matter, with work that challenges you, with relationships that change you, with moments that make the story worth telling. Because here's the thing Seneca keeps coming back to. You don't get to control how long your life is. Not really. But you do get to control how good it is. You get to decide what you fill it with. And that choice, that's where all the power is. A meaningful life doesn't need to be a long one, but a long life without meaning? Seneca would say that's the real tragedy. Not death, not a short life, but a long, empty one. That's what he wants us to avoid. And honestly, it's hard to argue with him on that. Seneca says something that sounds almost cruel at first. He says, a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man without trials. Read that again. He's not saying hardship is just something you survive. He's saying it's the thing that makes you. Without it, you're unfinished. You're rough stones sitting in the dirt, looking like every other rock. And he doesn't soften the blow. He doesn't say, well, hopefully things will be easy for you. No, he goes further. He says, there is no easy way from the earth to the stars. No shortcut, no workaround, no hack. The path to anything worth having runs straight through difficulty. That's not a suggestion. That's Seneca laying down a law of life. But here's where it gets really interesting. Most people hear this and think, okay, so I just need to endure hard stuff. That's part of it. But Seneca's point goes deeper than endurance. He argues that difficulties don't just test you, they literally strengthen you. He puts it plainly, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. Think about that comparison. Nobody walks into a gym and says, I hope this is easy. You go there to strain, to struggle, to break muscle down so it grows back stronger. Seneca's saying your mind works the exact same way. The struggle isn't the enemy of growth, it is the mechanism of growth. So when something hard happens, and it will, Seneca wouldn't tell you to grit your teeth and just get through it. He'd tell you to pay attention, because that's where the transformation is happening, right there, in the friction. And then he says something that honestly hits different. He says, the bravest sight in the world is to see a great man struggling against adversity. Not a man who's already won. Not a man standing on top of the mountain with his arms raised. The bravest sight is the man in the middle of the fight, still struggling, still getting hit, still going. Seneca respected that more than victory. Because victory can be luck. Victory can be inheritance. Victory can be timing. But a person in the middle of adversity, choosing not to quit, that's character. That's something you can't fake. And here's the part that might sting a little. Seneca turns to someone who's had it easy, someone who's never really been tested, and he doesn't congratulate them. He says, I judge you unfortunate, because you have never lived through misfortune. You have passed through life without an opponent. No one can ever know what you are capable of, not even you. Let that land for a second. He's calling a comfortable life unfortunate, not because comfort is bad, but because without resistance, you never find out who you actually are. You walk around with this untested version of yourself, and you assume that's you. But Seneca warns, you don't know that. You've never been pushed far enough to find out. It's like someone who's never been in deep water claiming they can swim. Maybe, maybe not. You don't know until the current pulls you under. And that's Seneca's real point here. He's not glorifying suffering for the sake of it. He's not saying go out and look for pain. He's saying when it finds you, and it will, don't run, don't collapse. Recognize it for what it is. It's the friction that's shaping you. It's the opponent that reveals what you're actually made of. Because here's the thing, you can't become sharp without being scraped. You can't become strong without being strained. You can't know your own depth without being pulled into deep water. Seneca understood this 2,000 years ago, and it's just as true now. The trials you're facing, they're not punishments. They're not proof that life is unfair. According to Seneca, they're the very thing turning you from rough stone into something that actually shines, but only if you stay in the friction long enough to let it work. Here's something Seneca says that should honestly stop you in your tracks. He writes, "People are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which they have a right to be stingy." Read that again, slowly. He's saying, you'll put a lock on your door, you'll password protect your phone, you'll haggle over the price of a coffee. But your time? You just give it away to anyone, for anything, no questions asked. And that's the contradiction Seneca keeps hammering on. We treat time like it's infinite, like there's always more of it. But money, we guard that. Property, we protect that. Reputation, we fight for that. Time, the only resource we literally cannot get back, we throw it around like it means nothing. Seneca doesn't think we have a time problem. He thinks we have a waste problem, and there's a massive difference between the two. He puts it bluntly, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. That line alone deserves to be tattooed somewhere you can see it every morning. Because he's not saying life is too short. He's saying we make it short. We do that. Through distraction, through delay, through filling our hours with things that don't actually matter to us. And he goes further. He says life is actually long enough, generous even, if it were all well invested. But when it gets burned up in what he calls heedless luxury and no good activity, we only notice it's gone when death shows up. That's the gut punch. You don't realize you've been wasting your life until it's too late to do anything about it. So Seneca's not giving you a motivational pep talk here. He's giving you a warning, a sharp one. He tells Lucilius, his friend, the guy he wrote most of these letters to, something that cuts even deeper. Omnia Luciliae alia messent, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything, Lucilius, belongs to others. Time alone is ours. Think about what he's really saying there. Your job? That belongs to someone else's system. Your house? The bank might have something to say about that. Your reputation? That lives in other people's heads. But your time, that's yours, fully, completely. It's the one thing you truly own. And yet, it's the one thing you're most careless with. Seneca argues that most people live as if they're going to be around forever. They postpone everything that matters. They say, I'll get to it later. Later. Always later. But later has a deadline, and nobody knows when that deadline hits. He's not being dramatic for the sake of it. He's being precise, because when you look around, really look, you see it everywhere. People spending hours doing things they don't care about, saying yes to obligations that drain them, scrolling through nothing, sitting in meetings that lead nowhere, and then complaining that life is short. Seneca would say, no, life isn't short. You're just not paying attention to where it's going. And that's the real lesson here. He's not telling you to hustle harder or fill every minute with productivity. That's not the point. The point is awareness. The point is intentionality. He wants you to treat your time the way you treat your money if you knew you were running out of it, with care, with thought, with a real sense of what it's worth. Because the truth is, you are running out of it every single day. You just don't feel it yet. So Seneca's advice is almost embarrassingly simple. Be stingy, not with your money, not with your kindness. Be stingy with your time. Guard it, protect it. Stop handing it over to people and things that don't deserve it. He warns that the people who waste time are the same ones who at the end beg for more of it. And by then, it doesn't matter how much they beg. It's already gone. That's not pessimism. That's just honesty. And Seneca was nothing if not honest. Seneca makes a point that honestly hits harder the more you sit with it. He argues that most of our suffering isn't real. It's borrowed from a future that hasn't arrived yet and might never arrive at all. Think about that for a second. How much of what stresses you out right now is actually happening to you? Not something that could happen, not something that might happen next month, but something that is genuinely, concretely hurting you in this moment. Seneca would say, almost none of it. He puts it bluntly, we are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality. And that line is devastating, because it's true. The human mind is an incredible thing, but it has this nasty habit of working against us. It builds worst-case scenarios. It rehearses disasters. It runs simulations of things going wrong, over and over again, until we're exhausted from events that never even took place. Seneca saw this clearly, thousands of years ago. He warns that we torment ourselves with our own imagination far more than life itself ever does. The mind doesn't just anticipate problems, it magnifies them. It takes a small worry and inflates it into something monstrous, and we feel the weight of that monster as if it's real, as if it's already here. But it's not. That's what makes this so frustrating. The pain is real. You genuinely feel the anxiety, the dread, the tightness in your chest. But the cause? The cause is fiction. It's a story your mind wrote and then convinced you was true. Seneca addresses this directly in one of his letters to Lucilius, where he talks about what he calls groundless fears, and the way he breaks it down is sharp. He says, "What I advise you to do is not to be unhappy before the crisis comes, since it may be that the dangers before which you paled as if they were threatening you will never come upon you. They certainly have not yet come. The dangers haven't come. They might never come, but you're already suffering from them. You're living through a crisis that doesn't exist yet. You've pulled pain out of the future and dragged it into your present, and now it's poisoning your today." And Seneca goes even further. He breaks down exactly how we do this to ourselves. He says, "Some things torment us more than they ought. Some torment us before they ought. And some torment us when they ought not to torment us at all. We are in the habit of exaggerating or imagining or anticipating sorrow. 3 categories. That's it. We either blow things out of proportion, we invent problems that don't exist, or we suffer from real problems way before they actually show up. And in all 3 cases, we're the ones doing it to ourselves. Not life, not fate, us." Now, here's the other side of it, and this is where Seneca shows a bit of optimism that people don't always expect from Stoics. He points out that fortune is unpredictable, yes, but that unpredictability works both ways. He writes, "Even bad fortune is fickle. Perhaps it will come, perhaps not. In the meantime, it is not. So look forward to better things." That's a subtle but powerful shift. He's saying, look, you don't know what's coming. Nobody does. So why default to dread? Why assume the worst? The future is uncertain, and that uncertainty isn't just a threat. It's also a door that stays open for something better. So what Seneca is really asking us to do is simple, but not easy. Stop rehearsing disaster. Stop living through pain that hasn't happened. The anxiety you feel about tomorrow, it's costing you today, and that's a trade you didn't agree to, but you're making it anyway, every single time you let your mind spiral into what could go wrong. He's not saying bad things won't ever happen. He's saying don't suffer them twice. Don't suffer them before they arrive, because most of the time, they never do. Seneca says something in his letters to Lucilius that honestly stops you in your tracks. He writes, "No one can lead a happy life, or even one that is bearable, without the pursuit of wisdom, and that the perfection of wisdom is what makes the happy life, although even the beginning of wisdom makes life bearable." Read that again. He's not saying wisdom makes life great. He's saying without it, life isn't even bearable. That's a heavy claim, and he's dead serious about it. See, most people hear the word philosophy and they think of dusty classrooms, old books nobody reads, debates about things that don't matter. But that's not what Seneca's talking about, not even close. For him, philosophy isn't some academic exercise you do for a grade or a degree. It's a way of life. It's how you deal with loss, how you handle fear, how you respond when everything around you is falling apart. That's philosophy to Seneca. It's survival equipment. And he goes even further. He writes, "To win true freedom, you must be a slave to philosophy." Now, that's a paradox, right? Slavery and freedom in the same sentence. But Seneca's making a sharp point here. He argues that real freedom, not the kind where you just do whatever you want, but the kind where your mind isn't controlled by fear, by anger, by greed, that kind of freedom only comes when you submit yourself to the discipline of thinking clearly, of examining your life, of questioning your assumptions. You have to chain yourself to wisdom so that nothing else can chain you. That's the trade-off he's proposing, and honestly, it's a pretty good deal. But here's where it gets really interesting. Seneca doesn't just say philosophy makes you free. He says it makes you alive. He writes, "Of all people, only those are at leisure who make time for philosophy. Only those are really alive. For they not only keep a good watch over their own lifetimes, but they annex every age to theirs." Think about what he's saying there. Most people, and he's blunt about this, most people aren't really living. They're busy, they're occupied, they're running around doing things, but they're not alive in any meaningful sense. They're just existing, going through motions, reacting to whatever life throws at them without ever stopping to ask why, without ever sitting with a difficult question long enough to actually learn something from it. But the person who makes time for philosophy, Seneca argues that person lives more than one lifetime. Because when you study wisdom, when you engage with the great thinkers who came before you, you absorb their experience, you learn from their mistakes, you inherit their insights. You're not just stuck in your own tiny slice of time anymore. You get access to centuries of human thought. That's what he means by annexing every age. It's not metaphor for the sake of being poetic. He means it practically. You actually expand the boundaries of your life by learning from others who already lived theirs. And notice, he says even the beginning of wisdom makes life bearable. You don't have to master it. You don't have to become some enlightened sage sitting on a mountaintop. Just starting the process, just asking the right questions, just being honest about what you don't know. That alone changes things. That alone gives you something to hold on to. So what does this look like in practice? It's not complicated. Seneca is not asking anyone to enroll in a philosophy program. He's saying, read, reflect. Sit with your own thoughts instead of running from them. Ask yourself hard questions. Why am I angry? Why am I afraid? What am I chasing, and is it actually worth it? That's philosophy. That's the pursuit of wisdom he's talking about. And he warns, if you skip this, if you fill your life with everything except this kind of reflection, you might look successful on the outside. You might have money, status, all of it. But inside, you'll be restless, anxious, unfree, because you never did the one thing that actually matters. You never learned how to think. Seneca says something that sounds almost too simple, but it's not. He says, we should not, like sheep, follow the herd of creatures in front of us, making our way where others go, not where we ought to go. Read that again. Where others go, not where we ought to go. There's a massive difference between those two things, and most people never even notice the gap. See, Seneca argues that one of the biggest threats to living a good life isn't some external disaster. It's not poverty, it's not illness, it's conformity. Just doing what everyone else does, without thinking, without questioning, just following. And he's not talking about some rebellious, contrarian attitude for the sake of it. He's pointing at something deeper. He's saying that most people sleepwalk through their decisions because the crowd already made those decisions for them. Think about it. Why do people chase the things they chase? Why the same careers, the same status symbols, the same lifestyles? Is it because they sat down, thought hard about what actually matters to them, and chose deliberately? Or is it because that's just what everyone around them was doing? Seneca would say it's almost always the latter, and that's the trap. He warns that the crowd is not a good guide, not because people are stupid, but because the crowd doesn't think. That's the whole point. A crowd moves on momentum, on habit, on imitation. And when you just fall in line, you inherit everyone else's values, everyone else's anxieties, everyone else's definition of success. None of it yours. And he goes further. He says the Stoic pays no attention to what others consider shameful or miserable. He does not walk with the crowd. That line is sharp, because he's not just saying ignore trends or popular opinion. He's saying stop outsourcing your judgment. Stop letting the people around you decide what's worth being afraid of, what's worth being embarrassed about, what's worth wanting. That takes guts, because going against the herd means standing alone sometimes. It means people looking at you sideways. It means your choices won't always make sense to the people around you. And Seneca knew that. He wasn't naive about it. But he argues that the discomfort of standing apart is nothing compared to the cost of living someone else's life without realizing it. And here's where it gets really practical. Seneca doesn't just say, think for yourself and leave it there. He points out that the influence of the crowd sneaks in everywhere. It's in the conversations you have, the things you start wanting after scrolling through what everyone else has, the way you start measuring your life against benchmarks that were never yours to begin with. It's subtle. That's what makes it dangerous. He's basically saying you won't even know you've been absorbed by the herd. That's the whole problem. You'll think your opinions are your own. You'll think your goals are your own. But if you trace them back honestly, a lot of them were just borrowed, absorbed, never examined. So what does Seneca suggest? Pause. Question: before you chase something, ask why. Before you fear something, ask why. Is this actually something you care about? Or is it just the noise of the crowd echoing inside your head? That's the Stoic move. Not rebellion for the sake of rebellion, but clarity, intentional living. Choosing your path because you actually thought about it, not because it was the most obvious one. And look, this isn't about isolating yourself or thinking you're better than everyone else. Seneca wasn't antisocial. He had friends, mentors, community. But he draws a hard line between being around people and being controlled by them. You can walk among the crowd without walking with it. That distinction matters more than ever, because the pressure to conform doesn't come with a warning label. Nobody tells you, hey, you're about to abandon your own judgment and just copy what everyone else is doing. It just happens, quietly, gradually, and one day you look up and realize the life you're living was never really yours. Seneca saw that 2,000 years ago, and he's telling you, don't be the sheep. This might be the most famous idea Seneca ever put forward, and it's one of those things that sounds simple until it actually hits you. He writes, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." And then he goes further. He says life is long enough, genuinely long enough, for the highest achievements, if it were all well invested. But when it's wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we're forced at last by death's final constraint to realize it has passed away before we knew it was passing. That last part, read it one more time. It has passed away before we knew it was passing. That's not philosophy. That's a gut punch. Because Seneca isn't making some abstract argument about mortality here. He's pointing at something very specific. He's saying, you're not running out of time. You're throwing it away, and you don't even notice you're doing it. And he's right. Think about how most days actually go. Not the days you plan, the days that just happen. You wake up, you scroll, you react to things, you handle stuff that feels urgent but isn't important. You get to the end of the day, and you can't really point to what you did. Where did it go? You had the hours, they were there, but they slipped through like water. Seneca warns that this isn't a bad day problem, it's a life problem, because those days stack up. Weeks become months, months become years, and then one day you look back and go, wait, how did I get here? When did all that time pass? He puts it bluntly. He says you spend so much of your life not aware of what you're losing. And when the time comes to tally up how you spent it, you'll be able to see how little some things mattered. That word, tally, like in accounting. Seneca is asking you to audit your life the way you'd audit a business. Where did the resources go? What was the return? And for most people, the answer is uncomfortable. The return is almost nothing, because the investment was almost nothing. But here's what makes Seneca's argument different from the usual time is precious talk. He's not just saying be productive. He's not saying hustle harder or fill every minute with activity. That's not his point at all. What he argues is that the waste comes from living unconsciously, from heedless luxury, his words. Not luxury as in expensive things, luxury as in comfort, ease, going through the motions without ever stopping to ask, is this what I actually want to be doing with the time I have? And that question is terrifying, because most people never ask it. They just keep going, keep busy, keep distracted. And Seneca says that's exactly how a long life becomes a short one, not because the years weren't there, but because you weren't present for them. He also makes this distinction that's easy to miss. He says, we are not given a short life, but we make it so. We are not ill-supplied, but wasteful of it. That phrasing matters because it puts the responsibility squarely on you. It's not fate, it's not bad luck, it's not the universe being cruel. It's you, making choices, or worse, not making choices, that drain your life of substance. And then he lands on this line that just stays with you. Life is long if you know how to use it. If. That one word carries the whole argument, because Seneca isn't promising you a long, meaningful life. He's saying the raw material is there, the years are there, but knowing how to use them, that's the skill most people never develop. They learn how to make money, how to build careers, how to manage other people, but they never learn how to manage their own time, their own attention, their own life. And so they reach the end with plenty of achievements, but very little living. That's what Seneca is warning against. Not death, not even wasted time really, but an unlived life. Seneca didn't just philosophize about anger from a comfortable distance. He lived with it. He served as advisor to Emperor Nero, one of the most volatile, dangerous, unpredictable rulers in Roman history. So when Seneca talks about anger, he's not guessing. He's speaking from experience, real, life-threatening experience. And he doesn't sugarcoat it. He calls anger a short madness. Not frustration, not passion, madness. He says it's like a ruin, which in falling upon its victim breaks itself to pieces. Think about that. Anger doesn't just destroy the thing it's aimed at. It destroys the person carrying it, every time. You think you're wielding anger like a weapon against someone else, but Seneca says no, you're the one getting crushed under the rubble. He actually wrote an entire book on this, a whole book. That's how seriously he took it. And in it, he makes this argument that's incredibly sharp. He says the best plan is to reject anger at its very first spark. Resist it at the beginning. Because once you let it in, once you give it even a little authority over your mind, it stops asking for permission. It just takes over. He compares it to an enemy at the gates of a city. You have to meet it at the outermost frontier. Drive it back before it enters. Because once it's inside the walls, it doesn't negotiate. It doesn't let its prisoners set limits on how far it goes. It conquers everything. That metaphor is devastating, and it's true. We've all felt it. That moment where anger slips past the gate, and suddenly you're saying things you don't mean, doing things you can't undo. Seneca saw this pattern clearly, and he warns, don't wait until you're in the middle of it to try and regain control. By then, reason is already gone. Passion has taken the wheel. So what's his solution? Simple. Not easy, but simple. He says the greatest remedy for anger is delay. That's it. Just wait. Pause. Don't react in the moment. Let time pass. Let the heat come down. Because anger in the moment feels righteous. It feels justified. But give it an hour, a day, a night of sleep, and suddenly it looks different, smaller, less urgent. Seneca understood that anger feeds on speed. It wants you to act now, and the single most powerful thing you can do is refuse. But he goes deeper than just managing anger. He questions whether it's even worth having in the first place. He points out something painfully obvious that most of us ignore. Anger always outlasts hurt. The thing that made you angry, it passes, it fades. But the anger itself, it lingers. It sticks around long after the original wound has healed. So you end up suffering twice, once from the injury, and then again, for much longer, from your own reaction to it. And revenge? Seneca is completely against it. He argues that vengeance wastes enormous amounts of time, and actually exposes you to more injuries than the one that started everything. You think getting even will close the chapter, but it opens 10 new ones. He says the better path, the smarter path, is to heal. Take the opposite course. Don't match the energy. Rise above it. He even puts it in blunt terms. Would anyone think it normal to return a kick to a mule or a bite to a dog? Of course not. So why do we feel compelled to return every slight, every insult, every petty wrong done to us? Seneca says that impulse isn't strength. It's weakness disguised as toughness. And then there's this line that really puts everything in perspective. He says, mankind is born for mutual assistance. Anger is born for mutual ruin. That contrast is everything. Our nature, our actual human nature, is to help each other. Anger works against that. It tears apart the very fabric of what makes us human. Seneca warns that if pity didn't exist to limit anger, the entire world would destroy itself. That's not exaggeration, that's observation. He'd seen what unchecked anger could do. He'd watched it up close, in the eyes of an emperor who answered to no one. And his message is clear. Anger may feel powerful, but it's a fire that burns the hand holding it first. Seneca makes an argument that sounds simple, but is actually one of the hardest things to live by. He says, for good or for ill, life and nature are governed by laws that we can't change. The quicker we accept this, the more tranquil we can be. That's it. That's the whole thing. Accept what you can't change and stop bleeding energy fighting it. But we don't do that, do we? We fight everything. We fight aging, we fight loss, we fight the fact that people change, that seasons end, that things we love don't last forever. And Seneca watched people do this 2,000 years ago and basically said, you're exhausting yourself for nothing. He's not talking about giving up. That's important to get right. He's not saying lie down and let life roll over you. What he's saying is there are certain things built into the fabric of existence. Death, change, decay, the passage of time. These aren't bugs in the system. They are the system. And the moment you stop treating them like personal attacks, something shifts inside you. You get calmer, clearer. You stop wasting your fight on things that were never going to bend. And in one of his letters to Lucilius, Seneca puts it in a way that's hard to forget. He says, if we follow nature, all is easy and unobstructed. But if we combat nature, our life differs not a whit from that of men who row against the current. Think about that image for a second. Rowing against the current. You're sweating, your arms are burning, you're putting in massive effort, and you're barely moving. Maybe you're even going backward. That's what Seneca says life looks like when you fight the natural order of things. All effort, no progress. All resistance, no peace. But the person who flows with the current, they're not lazy, they're not passive. They just understood something the other person didn't, that the river was always going to go in one direction, and working with it gets you further than working against it ever could. So what does this actually look like in real life? It means stop being angry that people aren't who you want them to be. People act according to their nature. Seneca points this out over and over. Expecting others to behave against their character is like expecting a dog to talk. You can be frustrated all day. It won't change a thing. It means stop resenting the fact that you're getting older. That's nature. That was always the deal. You didn't get tricked. You got the same contract everyone else got. It means accepting that some things are just outside your control. The weather, the economy, other people's opinions of you. Seneca argues that peace doesn't come from controlling everything. It comes from knowing what's yours to control and releasing the rest. And here's the part people miss. Seneca isn't being cold about this. He's being compassionate. He's watching people tear themselves apart over things they were never going to change, and he's saying, stop, you're hurting yourself. The laws of nature don't care about your frustration. They'll keep operating whether you accept them or not. The only variable is how much suffering you add to the process. That's the key word, add. Because Seneca draws a sharp line between pain that life gives you and pain you create yourself. Life gives you loss. You create the bitterness about it. Life gives you uncertainty. You create the anxiety around it. Life gives you change. You create the resistance to it. And all that extra pain, that's what disappears when you follow nature instead of fighting it. Seneca's not asking you to like everything that happens. He's asking you to stop pretending it shouldn't happen. Because the moment you argue with reality, you lose. Every single time. Follow nature. Work with the current. Stop rowing the wrong way and wondering why you're exhausted. That's not weakness. According to Seneca, that's the beginning of actual wisdom. Seneca has this practice that sounds almost crazy at first. He says, set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, is this the condition that I feared? So he's telling you to deliberately live like you have nothing. Eat the cheapest food, wear rough clothes, strip away the comfort, and not because something went wrong, but on purpose, by choice. Why would anyone do that? Because Seneca understood something most people never figure out. The fear of losing what you have is often worse than actually losing it. And the only way to break that fear is to practice living without it, before life forces you to. See, most people build their entire lives around comfort. Nice meals, soft beds, good clothes, convenient everything. And there's nothing wrong with that on its own. But here's where it gets dangerous. When you can't function without it. When the idea of losing your lifestyle terrifies you more than anything else. Small, controlled dose of hardship. So that when real hardship shows up, and it will, you're not completely destroyed by it. You've already been there. You've already tasted it. And you survived. So the fear loses its grip on you. And that question he asks at the end, is this the condition that I feared? That's the whole point, because most of the time, the answer is yes. Yes, this is what I was so afraid of. And look, it's not that bad. I'm still here. I'm still fine. The thing I was terrified of losing control over, it doesn't control me as much as I thought. That's freedom, real freedom. Not the kind that comes from having more, the kind that comes from needing less. But Seneca takes it even further. He warns that comfort itself, past a certain point, becomes destructive. He says, pleasures, when they go beyond a certain limit, are but punishments. That's a line worth sitting with. Because he's not anti-pleasure. He's not saying live like a monk and never enjoy anything. He's saying there's a tipping point, and most people blow right past it without noticing. Think about it. The first bite of a great meal, amazing. The 20th, you feel sick. A night of relaxation, wonderful. A month of doing nothing, you start to feel hollow. Pleasure has diminishing returns, and when you chase it past the point where it actually serves you, it starts to eat you alive. It makes you soft, dependent, anxious about losing it. Seneca saw this everywhere in Rome. People drowning in luxury, surrounded by everything money could buy, and absolutely miserable. Not because they had too little, but because they had too much, and they had no idea who they were without it. So his solution wasn't to reject pleasure entirely, it was to practice going without it, regularly, intentionally, so that it never owns you, so that you enjoy the good things in life from a position of strength not desperation. And that's the distinction that matters. Seneca's not preaching suffering for suffering's sake. He's preaching resilience. He's saying, if you can sleep on a hard floor and eat plain bread for a few days and still be okay, then nothing life throws at you can truly break you. You've already proven to yourself that you can handle it. But if you've never tested yourself, if you've only ever known ease, then the first real loss, the first job gone, the first financial hit, the first crisis, will feel like the end of the world because you have no reference point for surviving without your comforts. Seneca argues that the person who voluntarily chooses discomfort isn't punishing themselves. They're training, they're preparing, they're building something most people never build. The quiet confidence that comes from knowing you'll be okay no matter what happens. And that kind of confidence, you can't buy it. You can only earn it the hard way. This ties directly to what Seneca said about borrowing suffering from the future, but he takes it a step further. He doesn't just warn against living in the future. He argues that most people barely live in the present at all, and that's a bold claim, but Seneca backs it up. He points out that people spend an enormous amount of their mental energy either dwelling on the past or anxiously reaching toward the future, regretting what happened, worrying about what's next. And in the middle of all that, the only moment that's actually yours, the present, just slips away, unnoticed, unlived. Seneca puts it like this: true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future. Not to ignore the future, not to be reckless, but to stop being so dependent on it. Stop placing all your hopes and all your fears on a version of your life that doesn't exist yet. Because when you do that, you rob the present of everything it has to offer. And here's what makes Seneca's perspective so sharp. He argues that life isn't actually short. People just waste most of it. He writes in On the Shortness of Life, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." That line should stop you cold, because the complaint everyone has, life is too short, Seneca flips it completely. He says, no, life is long enough. You're just not paying attention to it while it's happening. People postpone living. That's his core observation. They tell themselves they'll start enjoying life after the next promotion, after retirement, after the kids grow up, after this one thing gets sorted out. And Seneca watches this pattern and basically says, you're going to run out of time doing that. He warns that people treat time like it's infinite. They guard their money, their property, their possessions, but their time, they give it away to anyone who asks. They waste hours, days, years on things that don't matter. And then, near the end, they panic. They realize how little of their life they actually experienced. So what does Seneca suggest? Something deceptively simple. He says, begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. Each day, a separate life. That reframes everything. It means today isn't just a stepping stone to tomorrow, it's the whole thing. If you treated today like it was its own complete life, would you spend it the way you're spending it right now? Would you waste it scrolling, worrying, complaining, postponing? Probably not. And that's Seneca's challenge. He's not asking you to meditate on a mountain or abandon your responsibilities. He's asking something harder, to actually be where you are, to stop mentally living in some other time, some other version of your life. He also makes this distinction that's worth sitting with. He says life is divided into 3 periods: the past, the present, and the future. The past is gone. The future is uncertain. The present, it's brief, almost painfully brief, but it's the only one you can do anything with. And most people let it pass without even realizing it was there. So Seneca's message here isn't soft or sentimental. It's urgent. He's saying you are losing your life right now, not someday, now. Every moment you spend not present, not engaged, not actually living, that's time you don't get back. And no one's going to tap you on the shoulder and tell you it's running out. You just have to notice it yourself before it's too late.
Seneca makes a point that sounds simple, but actually cuts deep. He writes, "Choose someone whose way of life as well as words have won your approval. Be always pointing him out to yourself. There is a need for a standard against which we can measure ourselves. Without a ruler, you won't make crooked straight." That last line, "Without a ruler, you won't make crooked straight." Just sit with that for a second.
He's saying you can't fix what you can't measure, and you can't measure yourself against nothing. You need a reference point, a standard, someone whose life, not just their talk, but their actual life, represents something you respect. Someone you can hold up like a mirror and say, am I getting closer to that, or am I drifting? And Seneca's very specific here. He doesn't say find someone who gives good speeches. He doesn't say find someone who sounds impressive. He says find someone whose way of life as well as words have won your approval, both, because talk is cheap. Seneca knew that better than anyone. He lived in Rome. He was surrounded by politicians, rhetoricians, people who could make anything sound noble while living like hypocrites. So he's drawing a hard line. Your standard has to be someone who walks it, not just someone who preaches it. But why does this matter so much? Why can't you just figure it out on your own? Because Seneca understood something about human nature that most people don't want to admit. We're not as self-aware as we think. Left to our own judgment, we rationalize. We let ourselves off the hook. We lower the bar slowly, quietly, without even noticing. And one day we look up and realize we've drifted miles from where we intended to be, not because of one big wrong turn, but because of 1,000 tiny ones that nobody, including ourselves, was keeping track of. That's why he says you need a ruler, not a boss, not someone breathing down your neck, a ruler, like a measuring tool, something external and steady that doesn't bend just because you're having a bad day, something that holds its shape when you can't hold yours. And here's the part people miss. Seneca says, be always pointing him out to yourself. Always. Not once in a while. Not when you feel lost. Always. He's arguing that this isn't a one-time exercise where you pick a hero and move on. It's an ongoing practice, a daily recalibration. You keep checking yourself against that standard, because the drift never stops. Life keeps pulling you off course. Distractions, emotions, comfort, ego. And without that constant reference point, you won't even notice you veered. Now, who should this person be? Seneca doesn't give you a name and say, pick this guy. He leaves it open. It could be someone alive. It could be someone from history. It could be a philosopher, a leader, a mentor you actually know. The point isn't who. The point is that they're real to you. That when you think about how they'd handle a situation, it actually changes how you handle it. That's the test. If their example doesn't challenge you, doesn't make you uncomfortable sometimes, you've picked the wrong person. And this is where Seneca's advice gets brutally practical. He's not saying admire someone from a distance and feel inspired. He's saying use them as a tool, a corrective device. When you're about to cut corners, would they? When you're about to lose your temper, would they? When you're about to choose comfort over what's right, would they? That mental exercise done consistently reshapes behavior, not overnight, but over time. So the question Seneca's really asking, do you have that person, that standard, or are you just winging it? Because without one, he warns, you'll keep telling yourself you're on the right path. You'll keep adjusting the definition of good enough to match whatever you're already doing, and the crooked line
it stays crooked. You just stop seeing it.
Here's something Seneca did every single night, and it's so simple it almost sounds too easy to matter, but don't let that fool you. Every evening, after the lights went out and his wife had gone quiet, she knew the routine. Seneca would lie there and mentally replay his entire day. Everything he said, everything he did, every interaction. He'd run through it all like a judge reviewing a case, his own case.
He writes, "I make use of this opportunity, daily pleading my case at my own court. When the light has been taken away and my wife has fallen silent, aware as she is of my habit, I examine my entire day, going through what I have done and said. I conceal nothing from myself. I pass nothing by." That last part is key. He conceals nothing. He doesn't skip the embarrassing stuff, doesn't gloss over the moments where he lost his temper, or said something stupid, or acted out of ego. He looks at all of it.
But here's where Seneca does something really interesting, and it's the part most people miss. He doesn't beat himself up. He's not lying there drowning in guilt or shame. That's not the point. He says, "I have nothing to fear from my errors when I can say, 'See that you do not do this anymore. For the moment, I excuse you.'" Read that again. "For the moment, I excuse you." That's not weakness. That's wisdom. He's saying, yes, I messed up. I see it clearly. And now I'm going to do better. But I'm not going to destroy myself over it tonight. There's a massive difference between self-reflection and self-punishment. And Seneca understood that difference 2,000 years ago. Most people today still don't. Think about how most of us handle our mistakes. We either ignore them completely, push them down, pretend they didn't happen, or we spiral. We replay the moments obsessively, not to learn, to torture ourselves. Neither approach does anything useful. Seneca argues for a third path, a disciplined, honest review, like an audit. You're not the criminal in this scenario. You're the judge. And a good judge doesn't rage at the defendant. A good judge examines the evidence, delivers a fair assessment, and moves forward. And he did this every single day. That's the other thing worth noting. This wasn't something he pulled out once in a while when things went badly. It was a habit, a nightly ritual, non-negotiable. There's something powerful about that consistency, because when you review your day every night, you start catching patterns. You notice, oh, I keep reacting the same way in the same situations. You see the gap between the person you want to be and the person you actually were today. Not in some abstract philosophical way, in a concrete, specific, undeniable way. And that gap, that's where the real work lives. Seneca wasn't chasing perfection. He never claims to be a flawless Stoic. He's remarkably honest about his own shortcomings throughout his letters, but he's relentless about awareness. He believes the examined life, truly examined, not just vaguely thought about, is the only life that actually improves. So here's the practical takeaway from all this. At the end of your day, before sleep, ask yourself 3 things. What did I do well? Where did I fall short? What will I do differently tomorrow? That's it. No journal required, no app, no elaborate system. Just you, the dark, and the truth. But you have to be honest, brutally honest. And this is the Seneca part. You have to be kind about it too. Honest and kind. Not one or the other, both. He warns, essentially, that if you turn self-reflection into self-torture, you'll stop doing it. Nobody willingly walks into a beating every night. But if you make it a calm, honest conversation with yourself, you'll keep showing up. And over time, that nightly habit quietly reshapes who you are. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily, the way water shapes stone. Seneca argues that the people we surround ourselves with are either our greatest asset or our heaviest anchor. He warns that bad company corrupts character faster than we realize, and he's not wrong. The wrong crowd will drag you down. The right crowd will lift you higher than you could climb alone. He points out something crucial. We tend to become the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. Think about that. Your habits, your mindset, your ambitions, they're all being shaped, slowly but surely, by the people in your orbit. Seneca argues we should be ruthless about who gets access to our time and energy. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table. Some people are emotional vampires. Some are constant critics. Some are just stuck. And if you're not careful, their stagnation becomes your stagnation. But here's the flip side. Seneca also says we should welcome those we can improve. He sees growth as a two-way street. When you teach, you learn. When you lift others up, you rise with them. It's not just about finding mentors. It's about being one too. He warns against the trap of thinking you have nothing to offer. Even if you're just starting out, your perspective, your energy, your encouragement, someone out there needs it. And in giving it, you'll sharpen your own understanding. Seneca's point isn't just philosophical, it's practical. Want to get better at something? Surround yourself with people who are already doing it. Want to stay motivated? Find people who refuse to quit. Want to become more disciplined? Hang around people who show up every day. No excuses. But he also cautions, don't just collect impressive people like trophies. The goal isn't to build a network of high achievers who don't actually care about you. The goal is to build a circle of mutual growth, people who challenge you, people who support you, people who see your potential even when you don't. He argues that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your relationships, not the quantity, not the status, the quality. One true ally is worth more than 100 fair-weather friends. So ask yourself, who's in your inner circle right now? Are they pushing you forward or holding you back? Are you learning from them? Are they learning from you? If the answer is no to any of it, it might be time for a change. Seneca's advice is simple but brutal. Choose your crowd wisely, because in the end, you don't just become who you hang out with, you become who you choose to become. Seneca has this line that just hits different every time you read it. He says, "Putting things off is the biggest waste of life. It snatches away each day as it comes and denies us the present by promising the future." The biggest waste of life. Not laziness, not failure, not making bad decisions. Procrastination. That's what he picks. And when you really sit with it, you start to see why. Because here's what Seneca understood. Procrastination isn't just about being unproductive. It's not about a messy to-do list. It's about a fundamental misunderstanding of time itself. He argues that when we procrastinate, we're making a bet. We're betting that tomorrow is guaranteed, that next week is sitting there, waiting for us, arms wide open. And he says that bet is insane. We don't procrastinate because we're stupid. We procrastinate because we lie to ourselves. We tell ourselves there's more time. There's always later, Monday, next month, after the summer, after things settle down. And Seneca warns, that later you keep counting on, it doesn't belong to you. It never did. He puts it so bluntly, while we wait for life, life passes. That's not poetry for the sake of being poetic. That's a diagnosis. Seneca is pointing at something most of us do every single day without even noticing. We treat our real life, the one happening right now, like it's a rough draft. Like this is the rehearsal version, and the real performance starts someday. When we're ready, when the timing's right, when things fall into place. But Seneca says no, there is no other version. This is it. And every day you spend waiting for the right moment is a day you just handed over. Gone. Not paused. Not saved for later. Gone.
And what makes this worse, what makes procrastination so dangerous in Seneca's eyes, is that it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels rational. It feels responsible even. I'll start when I have more information. I'll do it when I'm less busy. These sound like reasonable things to say, but Seneca sees through that. He argues that these aren't reasons. They're excuses dressed up in logic, and they keep us trapped in a cycle where we're always preparing to live, but never actually living.
He's not talking about hustling harder, by the way. That's not the point. Seneca isn't saying grind 24/7 or sleep when you're dead. He's saying something way more uncomfortable.
He's saying, stop acting like your life is something that starts later. It already started, and you're wasting it. So what does he suggest? His advice is almost aggressively simple. He says, begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. Each day, a separate life. Think about what that means. If today were its own complete life, start to finish, would you spend it the way you're spending it? Would you keep pushing things off? Would you keep saying tomorrow? Probably not. And that's Seneca's whole point. He wants us to shrink our time horizon down to something we can actually feel. Because life as a concept is too abstract. It's too big. We can't wrap our heads around it, so we waste it. But a single day, that's real. That's concrete. You can hold that in your hands. And when you treat it like it matters, like it's the only one you've got, you stop deferring. You stop postponing the things that actually matter to you. Seneca doesn't shame us for procrastinating. He's not wagging his finger. He's trying to wake us up. He's saying, look, you keep acting like time is this unlimited resource you can draw from whenever you want. But it's not. It's leaking out of you right now as you sit there planning to start tomorrow. So the question he leaves us with isn't really about productivity or time management. It's deeper than that. It's, what are you waiting for? And is the thing you're waiting for even real? Or is it just a story you keep telling yourself so you don't have to begin?